This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. The number of people killed in Mozambique after Cyclone Kenneth rises to at least 38 as floods worsen.
The water levels keep rising. It keeps raining since yesterday, and a lot of people have been displaced from their homes because we have more than 3,000 houses that have been destroyed.
A special BBC Africa Eye investigation into the rising rate of male suicide and the cause. Also in the program, Rapping for Change, low voter numbers for South Africa's youth. Why are so many shunning the elections?
Let's talk politics. South Africa 2019, you're proud of it? I'm doubting it. Let's talk about ANC and this government. Since 94, we're really at war with government pawns.
And in sports, Ivory Coast international Eric Bailly set to miss the remainder of the Premier League season and the Africa Cup of Nations following a leg injury. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. We start the program with news that at least 38 people are now known to have died in Mozambique as a result of Cyclone Kenneth. Tens of thousands of people have been displaced since it struck on Thursday. Heavy winds and rain is hampering aid efforts to help those left stranded and displaced. The cyclone is the second powerful tropical storm to hit Southeast Africa in just 5 weeks. Sunita Jaswal reports.
These fields had been a lush green, but now they've turned brown with floodwater. 2 meters of rain in just one day and power cuts, plunging the coastal city of Pemba into darkness. The torrential rain kept on pouring, but now forecasters are warning there's still much more to come. This rescue team, sent by Brazil, managed to reach around 350 stranded people, but not everyone has been so lucky. The number of people killed has already risen, and authorities fear more will perish as remote communities remain cut off because aid agencies struggle to reach them.
According to the government, we have 700,000 people who are at risk after the cyclone, and 200,000 people who are at very high risk. So we are gearing up our emergency operation to make sure that we can bring the food and the aid that people need.
Cyclone Kenneth struck on Thursday night with winds of up to 280 kilometers per hour, flattening whole villages, damaging roads and infrastructure, and leaving a trail of destruction. The UN says the situation is worse than originally thought. The storm system is moving very slowly, and it's predicted to dump twice as much rainfall as Cyclone Idai did last month. There are also concerns the heavy rains could trigger landslides, as well as a cholera outbreak. The devastation will hurt the people of Mozambique, a country which had only just started to piece itself back together again after the last cyclone. Sunita Jaswal, BBC News.
Well, the BBC's Lebo Diseko is in the capital Maputo and has more now on aid efforts to help the tens of thousands of people affected by Cyclone Kenneth.
It does seem that weather conditions eased off slightly in the north of the country this morning, and that allowed aid agencies a little window of opportunity to start distributing aid. So the World Food Programme started handing out some supplies in Macomia. They also sent a plane out to the island of Ibo, which had been completely cut off yesterday. However, the situation is in flux. It's fast changing. They wanted to send in a second plane. That wasn't able to be sent. That was filled with rice, food, that sort of thing for people. The message from authorities in Pemba yesterday was this is worse than we had expected and we need help. There were concerns raised about things like cholera. Rain is expected for a number of days here. Yesterday, Pemba had 2 meters of rain. The issue is going to be how quickly they can get those supplies in. Planes were cancelled yesterday, roads very, very difficult to reach. So that's going to be the critical thing. How quickly are aid agencies going to be able to get in the supplies they need to reach the affected people?
Lebuzi Seko there in Maputo for us. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. Boeing's chief executive has insisted that safety is the firm's top priority after 2 plane crashes involving its MAX 737 aircraft left at least a total of 346 people dead. Addressing shareholders, Dennis Muhlenberg said by next week, regulators would be testing the model's anti-stall system, which is believed to be the cause of both crashes. BOEING has been remanded in custody until next month. The pop star turned opposition MP has been charged for taking part in last year's social media tax protest in Uganda, which has been deemed illegal by the government. A Liberian lawyer who challenged the destruction of the country's tropical forest for palm oil plantation has won the prestigious Goldman Environmental Prize for Africa. Alfred Brownell is being recognized for his campaigns to prevent more than 500,000 acres of forest from being cut down by Liberia's biggest palm oil company, Golden Verolium Liberia. Questions left unanswered, wishes unfulfilled. Every suicide leaves a hole in the lives of those left behind. It's an issue that affects us all, but men are particularly vulnerable. Statistics by the World Health Organization show over 9% of men committed suicide every year, 3 times the recorded number of women who take their lives worldwide. Now, according to latest statistics from WHO, Lesotho has recorded the highest number of men taking their own lives in Africa at 21.2%. Second on the list is Equatorial Guinea, which recorded over 16.4%. Cameroon follows behind at 12.2% and South Africa at 11%. Well, the BBC's investigations team, Africa Eye, spent time in Nyandarua County, central Kenya, where 70 people, almost all of them men, killed themselves last year. Peter Muremi reports.
Shamata Village, central Kenya. Police officer Wanja has been called to the scene of a suicide. It's the 3rd time this week. The man who took his own life was just 40, a husband and a father. Devastated, his brother has come to identify the body. Comforting words, but so many in pain. In the last decade, Kenya's suicide rate has doubled. This region alone has seen exceptionally high numbers, 70 over the past year, according to police figures. Most of them, men.
Why is it occurring in our area? The rate of poverty is higher than some other places. This might cause the suicide rate to be high.
The deceased man's cousin told me he'd reached the end of the road. He was unemployed, drinking a lot, and was struggling to find money to send his teenage son to school, she says. And then his wife left him. Poverty and pride, debt and depression. Men are suffering in silence. But community leaders are now urging them to speak up.
Why are people going to that point?
Men have issues, but they have nowhere to go, he says. This is 19-year-old Francis. He's just lost his father to suicide, and he confessed that he himself had considered taking his own life. But his relatives stepped in. They found his suicide note just in time.
When I was writing, I was serious, but since I never did that, and I have no plans to do that, because I'm now feeling the pain of being left. I don't want anyone else to suffer the same.
Suicide has long been a taboo here. But with so many men taking their own lives, some communities in Kenya are having to acknowledge that this is now a crisis that needs to be addressed. Peter Murimi, BBC News, Kenya.
Well, with me is Victor Ugo from the Mentally Aware Nigeria Initiative. It's a group that focuses on ending mental health stigma in Nigeria. Thanks for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa. So issues that have been raised, poverty, which leads to depression, leads to potential suicide. And then there is this, what people call toxic masculinity. In that report we've had, Peter, they're saying men have issues, but they have nowhere to go. What practical ways, what practical things can we do to help prevent suicide?
I think the first thing is to recognize that, first of all, it's already very difficult to discuss suicide in Africa itself, both for men and for women. And those difficulties more or less affect men more because culturally men are inclined to talk about their problems less. I mean, talking about your problems means that you're beginning to act like a female, really. And I feel like if you're talking about very practical solutions, then we need to start with education, with increasing mental literacy across the ground, both in urban areas and rural areas.
But what is alarming is that the rate is higher now. What do you think is stimulating this?
I can't say it's higher. I can say it's being reported more. Because in the past, when people actually die by suicide, it's covered up a lot because no one wants to be associated with a family that has someone that has attempted suicide or has died by suicide. And now we have the advent of social media and much more local media reach. So I can say reporting is higher because generally across the world, suicide rate is actually decreasing.
What have you been able to practically do that has been successful?
Well, I can say that what we try to normalize the conversation amongst both males and females. But one example that we have is in our organization at the start of our suicide hotline, we were just entertaining just calls. The first 6 months, we had about 85% of females calling in and about 15% of males. So
That's a very low, not 15 compared to 85%.
Yeah, so we try to think of ways to encourage conversations from men, and we added the component of texting, and we found that increased it by at least 25%. Which is a good number. Generally increased our calls or our intervention rates by at least 50%.
So let's speak in more of texting.
Yeah, just anything that can make them much more comfortable. You have to create solutions that apply more to the man's context of being able to speak anonymously.
But what about in the rural communities, and especially among the more mature generation who are quite culturally steeped towards masculinity, so to speak? Yeah.
Well, first of all, the conversation is important, like you can see in the video. Just having someone that everyone respects. Try to stimulate the conversation. If you can make it something like a monthly thing, like a monthly group discussion between men in their environments, and they can talk about their issues. They can talk about their wives and issues they have at home. They can talk about unemployment. They can talk about not being able to cope with maybe some kind of chronic disease condition that they have. Then they'll be able to share with others. And I think very importantly is to be able to train local health staff within that area to be able to give psychological interventions that are specific to men and masculinity.
All right, Victor Ugo, thank you for your thoughts on this very important subject. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, for more on this story, and of course, you can go to the other Africa Eye investigations. You can go to BBC Africa's YouTube page and search for Africa Eye. It's part of a series they are doing into masculinity in Africa. It's well worth looking at. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, as Cameroon win the Under-17 Africa Cup of Nations, a look at how FIFA is fighting age cheats in age-grade football. Peter has the details. I'm Sophie Ikenya, and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top story on this program: the number of people killed in Mozambique after Cyclone Kenneth rises to at least 38 as floods worsen. Some breaking news now, because the Islamic State group has released a video showing its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. It's the first time that the chief of the group has appeared in a video in 5 years. It cannot be verified when the video was filmed, but during the 18-minute address, al-Baghdadi says the group has carried out 92 operations in 8 countries. He said that the Easter Sunday attacks in Sri Lanka were carried out in revenge for Islamic State's losses in Baghouz. ISIL has been expanding its territory in West Africa. The breaking news coming to you. Now, in Tripoli, house-to-house battles have dominated weekend clashes between Libya's government forces and troops loyal to Commander Khalifa Haftar. Haftar's Libyan National Army, allied to a rival administration in eastern Libya, mounted an offensive on Tripoli 3 weeks ago. So far, it's failed to breach defenses in the city's south. Dayo Yusuf reports.
8 years since the death of Gaddafi, and Libya is in chaos. Troops loyal to the government are fighting off an offensive on the country's capital, Tripoli.
We are trying to cut off the enemy's supply line and stop them sneaking around us.
The self-styled Libyan National Army, led by strongman Khalifa Haftar, is attacking from the east. An opposition jet flies overhead. The jet's bombs miss the vehicles, and in the first time in years, military groups from Tripoli have worked together to defend Libya's UN-backed government. If forces reach the city center, protesters fear thousands more lives will be ruined. Many blame powerful states for backing the offensive, but some in Tripoli do not support the UN-backed government. People here are scared. They fear Libya is on the brink of civil war. Dayo Yusuf, BBC News.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's time now for some sport. Peter.
Many thanks, Sophie. Manchester United have confirmed that defender Eric Bailly will miss the remainder of the Premier League season and the Africa Cup of Nations after sustaining a knee injury against Chelsea at Old Trafford on Sunday. The 25-year-old was starting his first Premier League game in over 3 months when he was hurt in an accidental collision with Chelsea midfielder Mateo Kovacic during the second half of the 1-1 draw. Ivory Coast are one of the favourites for this summer's AFCON tournament in Egypt. They've been drawn in a group that also contains Morocco, South Africa and Namibia. In a statement, United said Eric Bailly has a medial ligament injury on his right knee, which will keep him out of the remainder of the season and the Africa Cup of Nations. Meanwhile, the local organizing committee for this year's Nations Cup in Egypt has announced the ticket prices for this summer's tournament. Tickets will go from approximately $6 to about $145 US. Ticket prices for the games that don't include Egypt will be available at 3 levels: $6, $18 and $30. Tickets for Egypt matches will be slightly more expensive depending on the stage of the tournament at which we are. Earlier during the tournament, each ticket will entitle the owner to attend 2 matches on the same day in the same stadium. Athletics now, and a total of 38 new records were set at Sunday's London Marathon, including by these two: women's winner Brigid Kosgei and her male counterpart Eliud Kipchoge. Kipchoge triumphed in 2 hours, 2 minutes and 38 seconds. That's the second fastest marathon in history and also the fastest the London Marathon has ever been run. Speaking today, the 34-year-old said his winning time was thanks to the quality of the competition.
I think yesterday was a good race. It's good actually to race in a competitive competition, and actually to have people who can push you up to the last kilometers. And for the last 2 races last year, from 35 I was running alone. In Berlin, from 25 I was running alone, but yesterday was a little bit tactical, and it's good for sport.
For her part, Brigid Kosgei's victory at the age of 25 means she's the youngest female ever to win the race. Let's go back to football, because congratulations are in order for Cameroon, who have won Africa's men's under-17 title with a penalty shootout win over Guinea on Sunday. But over the years, this competition has been dogged by allegations of age cheats, with many players barred from taking part. So how have the football authorities been handling this situation? BBC's Muthoni Mushiri takes a look.
How can you tell the age of a footballer? Well, you could ask them, but some players and teams have been accused of bending the truth. Teams from Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Congo-Brazzaville, Ghana and Kenya have been hit with age scandals in recent years. Football's world governing body FIFA introduced MRI scans to check the ages of players at the 2009 Under-17 World Cup. Now, I'm not going to get too much into science here, but basically, they look at the development of the bone area in the wrist joint. If the bones have fused together in this area, FIFA says it usually means the player is over 17 years old. Now, this has hit African teams before, for example, when FIFA took MRI scans of Nigeria's Golden Eaglets squad for the 2019 Under-17 AFCON. The results led to 5 players being dropped from the squad after their wrists failed the test. And it's not just African teams that have been hit, even Brazil's youth squad has fallen foul in the past. But why would players pretend to be younger than they are? Some players say it's an honest mistake. They genuinely believe their age is correct. And because they don't have access to their official birth records, or if a country's records aren't as reliable, birth dates can be hard to verify. But others say it could be down to personal ambition. Succeeding in football, especially internationally, can take years. So older players may knock a few years off in order to get ahead. But is this test foolproof? Critics argue that the MRI scans shouldn't be the only method of checking someone's age, saying they're not 100% accurate or fair to the players. They want genetics and environmental factors to also be considered. But FIFA believes the test is the simplest way to make sure there's a level playing field.
Sophie, how old did you say you were again? That's your sport.
I can't believe you just asked me that question, Peter. Right. Nearly 27 million people are registered to vote in South Africa's elections on the 8th of May. That's less than half the country's total population. 6 million young eligible voters didn't even bother to register earlier this year. So why are young people shunning the elections? Well, the BBC asked a few rappers in Johannesburg if they had a rhyme to answer that question.
The young people in South Africa care about jobs.
We want a system that is on par with international standards.
We would like to have input, but it's not taken as seriously.
Yo, let's talk politics. South Africa 2019, you're proud of it? I'm doubting it. Let's talk about ANC and this government. Since 94, we're really at war with government pawns. What we're fighting for, from DA to EFF, yo homie, it's all the same. To be honest, as a young, progressive, modern-day black person in South Africa, it's going to be pretty hard for me to choose like a party that represents my interest.
Is democracy about using your voice? Or is it all just an illusion of choice? Left and right, black and white, man, it's all the same thing.
I love my city. My country's the best in the business of sellouts. We work for minimum wages. They dine at the fanciest deckouts. Further insulting the youth with the promise of change and some handouts. You hear a lot of talk about apartheid still being the main reason why things are not moving forward, but then also to refer back to the fraud that's happening, the corruption in the country, the uncertainty, you know, the xenophobia. All of that for us is just an example of how we're not being listened to as a youth in South Africa.
See, criminalism became a religion the moment we started worshiping politicians. The young people in South Africa care about jobs. Mostly we're looking at service delivery. We're looking at education. I personally think young people should vote. Reason being, we're looking at the future. We are the future.
I am blessed to live in the best democracy modern government has ever produced. Yet what use are these freedoms if we don't know how best to use them? And I want to say to young people out there that there is room for us. All we have to do is knock on doors. We're not going to achieve it by sitting back and complaining. We need to get out there, speak up, be about it, and just do something.
Young South Africans there. Well, don't forget you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter. I'm @CKenya. That's all from Focus on Africa for now. Thanks for your company. Bye.